industry is today grappling with a huge economic turndown. Of course, this is been not, I would say, precedented by a huge threat of life, which is being looming all across the globe. You've seen developed countries like the UK and the US, Italy succumb to this particular virus. People didn't take it seriously, but thankfully, with our leadership, we got it up right, and we got it up at the right time, so that we've been able to curtail that to this particular point. Unfortunately, it has gotten a tremendous impact on economy, and the front line was the industries where we are all working in, travel and tourism. But I think today's date, each and every industry except for the pharmaceutical industry got affected with this particular outbreak. Now, I think what we need to look at is that what happens beyond this. How do we reinvent ourselves? How do we redo ourselves? And how do we go through this particular time? And for this, we've got a distinguished gathering with Mr. Sujit Banerjee, Ms. Jyoti Mayal, from Ms. Jyoti Mayal, Dr. Sanat Kaul, Mr. Ajay Singh, Mr. Rajiv Talwar. Sorry, ma'am, I don't remember your name for Blue Dot. I don't have my notes offhand, but we'll do the introductions. And Mr. Ashwani Lohani as well. I think he'd have to switch on his video right now to start with that. We've already got nearly 300 participants on this, and I would just now give the stage to Mr. Rajiv Talwar to take the proceedings of the day forward. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you everybody for being a part of this, and I think this is just the camaraderie of everybody coming together for this particular instance of the industry and to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Ankur, and welcome to
I'll just tell my
Lohani also. We are also going to get Dr. Naveen Dang, who's a part of the Empowered Committee for Diagnostics, to give us his views. Just to update everybody and not only welcome you, but of course the lockdown's been extended up to 3rd of May. We had a preparatory meeting with the panelists yesterday, and we were now trying to first gauge and to inform everyone that what is the new normal? What is going to be the new normal in this struggle, this is truly the World War III. It is being fought all over the world by each nation themselves and within themselves to overpower this virus. So we said the new normal would be a long revival period, because the immediate future is survival of each country and a healthy survival of their citizens. The next thing was that, yes, the byword right now is testing. We have to go into an overdrive of testing. The more we test, the more we will be able to control this with the help of course, isolation in terms of a lockdown, as well as social distancing. But that cannot be the permanent solution. Therefore, life at some point of time will have to start with all the precautions that are being practiced right now by everybody. So socializing will be something which is at a lower scale in future, and therefore what portends for tourism, hospitality, civil aviation. Number one will be that those who are perhaps over leveraged may see a time of difficulty. There are others who are into rental premises who will find a problem. There are similarly options which are going to come before the airlines. I could see a photograph of what the seating arrangement probably was or could be in the middle row missing. But with payloads going down, can it be substituted by cargo? Because I think airlines like SpiceJet, Blue Dart are continuing their operations to help the nation in essential supplies and their transportation. So will that be a viable alternative? How will it be financed? How will the market operations grow? Is the new normal which is going to come in the future. The next thing that we discussed was, what are the strategic decisions that you will have to take? We figured out the following. Number one was to cut costs. Number two, will there be a reduction in salaries? Number three, cut debt or sell a part of the equity, because that is something which is going to sustain you in the immediate future for the next year or two. The third thing which we discussed was that this is the time to curb negativity and promote positivity, whether it is at a local level, whether at a regional level, or at a digital level. Both promote positivity and provide a platform for something which we feel will be, thanks to the large Indian market of 1.3 billion people, it would mean that yes, even with curbs, whether it is aviation, whether it is railways, whether it is road transport, they will have to come into play at a very serious and a very charged level. But probably the benefit would be for pass tourism, as Ashwini called it, or that 52 weekend getaways, or people hoping to get out immediately after this prolonged period of a lockdown, and how to rein that in to the advantage of all the players. Whether it is, I mean, fortunately, destinations in India are very widespread locally. They are at a local level, regional level, and at a national level. So, how do we all gather our resources and promote those and provide for some trade? Because international tourism, probably, or business tourism, will be at a very low ebb. So, what did we think we should ask for? One is that, like every industry, a rollover of 2 years for the tourism, hospitality, and the, I mean, transportation industry, which is aviation. Railways is a government department, so that should be, they will fend for themselves, and road transport. And will there be examples like the Delhi government, which is hoping to provide something like 5,000 rupees to each cab driver and each auto driver? Similarly, lots of our own players and stakeholders in these industries of tourism, hospitality, and aviation, maybe they would ask that yes, their limits, bank limits, should be increased. We were fortunate to have the chairman of State Bank of India 2 days ago, and he said they've given up, the Indian Banks Association has said that a 10% increase can almost be automatic in every working capital limit. The ceiling on that, the cap on that is 200 crores. But then, fortunately, except for maybe the airlines, who will have a limit of something like 2,000 crores, so that 10% is 200. So maybe that is something to look forward to. But we also have to worry for salaries, because 2 months, March and April, you have all paid salaries, and that is, please remember, 1/6 of 16% of your annual wage bill. So should we ask for some help on funding of salaries, or a better suggestion given by her from Blue Dart, that Tulsi ji, that she said that, look here, whenever an employee puts in his EPF or ESIC contribution, there is a similar contribution by the employer. I think to that extent, when we can show the salaries being paid to our employees, the contribution for the next 1 year or 2 years of the employer should go from the government, which is a form of savings and long-term savings, and that will also give some relief and some extra 8.3% maximum to the employers themselves. The last thing which we said was that we must bring forward to every government, whether it is at the local level, whether it is at the state level, or at the national level, that tourism, hospitality, hotels, airlines, road transport, local road transport within towns has the shortest incubation period. From virtually your education or your experience, you can go straightway into a job with the least bit of training and do on the job training. So with the incubation period being so low, it should be to the advantage of government when they are thinking of providing immediate employment. Our sectors should be in the forefront of consideration by the government. So maybe the suggestion of Tulsi ji that, sorry, that's Ms. Tulsi Nirshandani. So, pardon me, allow me to call you Tulsi ji. And that her suggestion that the EPF contribution should be funded by the government, it will actually mean protection to the employee and yet a form of savings for the government to add to their uh, to their uh, resources. Then we said that this is the time till 3rd of May now from today. A very good suggestion by Dr. Sujit Banerjee or Mr. Sujit Banerjee that it is time to perfect our protocols. Protocols would be very much required, whether it is for aircraft, trains, buses, road transport, sanitizing of premises, eateries, which will be in huge number, what will be the future of malls and retail. So it's probably time to be utilized in small groups, how to do the protocols for this and then give it to the nation as something which is already prepared. I'm sure that we can reach to one person who is our favorite and has been associated with us for maybe 3 decades and more, which is Amitabh Kant, today leading at the Niti Aayog. A great contribution by him and one of our own IT wizards in travel and tourism, Deep Kalra. They are the ones who actually formed the core team for doing the Arogya Setu, which has been recognized not only by Apple and Google, but also by the World Bank, that it's a path-breaking app which is to be copied by these big giants of IT and also by other nations because it gives you the easiest tracing and tracking system. So, and of course, also precautions to be taken. Then we said that when we came down specifically to domestic aviation, we said they have they have a very bright future, but with constraints. So, will it be? There was a suggestion by Dr. Sanat Kaul that will all passengers require certificates, health certificates, before boarding, so it becomes easier, or will they not require? It is yet to be decided. There was a suggestion by Ashwini that ATF, this is the time to get ATF into GST and thereby also see that yes, revenue can be regulated and at the same time, GST, whether it is on hotels, whether it is on travel and tourism, is there a possibility of decreasing that by 50%? And Ashwini even pointed out with his experience in Air India that it is time to ask the private operators as well as the Airports Authority of India for concessions right now. Because various charges imposed, whether it is route navigation charges, whether it is parking charges, whether it is slots, those concessions should also be forthcoming to give a fillip to that industry. Then movement of goods and cargo services, we've covered that Blue Dart and SpiceJet have been doing yeoman service to the nation. And maybe it's time now to not only think of in good old times that a Boeing 747 used to take roses to Amsterdam, but it is time to transport right within the country essential supplies and maybe agricultural supplies and fresh fruits and vegetables from one corner to the other. This is a huge opportunity for the supply chain. Long distance agricultural produce movement will go by the road and rail, but maybe it will also have a good share from the airlines. Whether to defer payments, which are possible, we ask for a rollover, and payments which are maybe to airports and airport authorities, those we can ask for deferment. I leave it now to the panel for giving their suggestions. May I invite Mr. Ajay Singh to start the, and Dr. Naveen Dang is here. Since Naveen has to go into a meeting of the Empowered Committee, if you permit, I will ask the panel to allow Dr. Naveen Dang 2 or 3 minutes to give his views and how diagnostics will be in the forefront of this fight against coronavirus. Naveen, if you can hear me, please carry on.
Thank you, Rajiv. Can you hear me, please?
Yep.
Yes, we all can.
The crux to success, one of the major important points is testing. Like what we have all been discussing about and what our Honorable Prime Minister also just that yes, social distancing is the number of which are being performed. As you all know, initial status, it has to be with the patient present with symptoms. The most sensitive test, the most specific test at that time is real-time PCR, which consists of taking a nasopharyngeal swab and a throat swab. That means a swab which is taken from the nose and from the throat. The result of this should be available within a day or so. And if the patient is found to be positive, then the patient is sent into isolation and all the contacts are traced. And further, they are again sent into isolation, like what you do a contact tracing. And then the patient is managed as per the treatment protocol. But on the other hand, if we miss out the patient the first day or like the next few days, and we come to know later on, then we are in a perfect yarn. Well, by the time the patient was spread the virus to so many others around him. Second option is serology, which still now has not been permitted by the government, which we expect that we will get a go-ahead for doing serology, maybe after 2 weeks or so. Once serology is there, that will mean that will be a simple blood test. That will only be a blood test. And with that blood test, we'll be able to see the patient has been exposed or not. The advantage of that will be that if a patient is found to be positive, we can say that we can tell the patient that please go ahead and work properly, go to the front line. So both the roles, that is the real-time PCR is for actual diagnosis, and serology will be to see if there's a seroconversion, and that if the patient is now in a position to go and start working back again. Now, as far as serology, the testing procedure is concerned, it has been mandated by Indian Council of Medical Research after a lot of discussion. There was a court case filed, then again a review petition was filed against yesterday, and now we are at a stage that we are mandated to do the test at a cost which is mandated by the ICMR, and of course, and we have to do the test, and which will be a pleasure and privilege for all the below poverty line patients and for patients from economically weaker sections. Again, the private sector decided that as we do not want the patients, suspected patients, like what I say, every patient is positive till proved otherwise. We do not want the suspect patients to come to our main labs, because that will mean they will interact with other patients and can spread infection, which is going to be another hazardous thing. So we are only doing home calls. Home calls are done by all of us, all the mandated labs, all the approved labs through the websites. Then our collection team goes to the house, collects the sample, brings it back, the test is performed, and the reports are immediately real-time informed to the government also and to the patient also. So this is in short what the procedure is like. For booking the test, you have to go online to any of your preferred labs and can then get your test done. But for booking your test done, three most important things which are required are a doctor's prescription, which is extremely mandatory, because we do not want these precious resources to be wasted. We want a patient's Aadhaar card or any government identity. And third, there is a form which is there available on all the websites. The form has to be printed out, filled, and then uploaded again. No, the process is not as difficult as it's sounding to be. It takes just a few minutes for the forms to be filled and doctor's prescription is there. And then within
Something with the connection.
any questions, please?
Naveen, thank you so much. We know that you are busy with the Empowered Committee. What
No,
we will do is,
any question, my privilege. I've got a few minutes. If you want to ask me anything, I'm listening.
I think what we will do is, because there are a number of panelists yet to speak, so what we will do is, any questions which are there will be given to the hosts and we will forward it to you. We have your email. Thank you so much. And we will get back to those questioners individually and independently of right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naveen, and thank you for sparing your time. Most kind of you.
Thank you. My privilege
And
always.
now invite Mr. Ajay Singh, the founder of SpiceJet, to speak. Ajay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Radhaji. From aviation's perspective, of course, as you know, aviation is the most impacted industry in this crisis, not only in India, but throughout the world. Basically, revenues from aviation have come to zero uh, again across the world. And you've seen that governments across the world are trying their best to ensure that airlines don't collapse in this process and are offering help. From India's perspective, I think, while of course we need short-term help from the government, and I think the government is actively looking to see what they can do. They've had several discussions with us, and we are talking to them on a nearly daily basis. This is also an opportunity, I believe, that we can find the structural reform that we've been looking for so many years. People say that India only reforms in a crisis, and if that is true, we should certainly use this crisis to bring about the reforms that we have sought for so long. Amongst them, of course, as Ashwini ji has pointed out already, this trying to get aviation turbine fuel under GST is a long pending request. This is something which makes us cost competitive with the airlines around the world. I think increasingly we need to see how we can use this crisis to increase the Indian aviation footprint in our region and throughout the world. And to make that happen, it's important that our cost structures be aligned or even reduced compared to airlines that we compete with, including the likes of Emirates and Etihad and Singapore Airlines and all these airlines in the region, the Fly Dubais of the world, and so on. So I think getting ATF under GST is something that's important. We should get it done immediately. The second thing that we need to look at is this whole structure of airports and the way that airport concessions are being given. And they are normally given to the person who can give airport authority the highest amount of money. In turn, the airport operator then asks people to bid for services like cargo handling or like ground handling or even check-in facilities, and these are given again to the highest bidder. So when the highest bidder actually gets to perform these services, then they need to maximize profits, and therefore they ask the airlines and the consumers, the passengers, to pay the highest amount that they possibly can get from them. So under those circumstances, the whole structure is designed to increase cost of aviation rather than reduce it. An example is something like what is being charged today by Sita. We are paying today 60-70 rupees to them for every passenger checked in, when where all they do is to provide a terminal and a barcode scanning facility. So those kind of anomalies have to be done away with. Infra charges at airports, for example. I mean, if you put fuel in a tank at an airport, that tank, which probably costs in Delhi something like 25 crores to build, the airport actually recovers from the airlines 450 crores a year. So we have crazy anomalies like that. This is the time when we should look at these kind of areas and try and make sure that we reduce cost for the longer term. We've seen as we take cargo throughout the country, we've seen how countries protect their own carriers. Today, when we go to the Middle East, we are told clearly that we are not welcome. And the Middle East carriers keep pushing the Indian government to try and get more and more of their flights into India. The same happens in China. So we need to be clear about what our long-term objective is. And if our objective really is that we should create global airlines from India and we should create global hubs in India, we need to get our policies right, and this is the right time to debate this and get structural changes in our system. So I think going beyond the short-term fixes, some of which were mentioned by you, maybe perhaps, paying some, helping out with some salaries as other countries have done, at least to the employees who get very little money. Perhaps getting an exemption on airport charges for a period of time. Perhaps getting some aviation turbine fuel on credit with interest subvention from government, etc. So there are these issues. Excise duty, of course, on ATF, which is at 11%, can be reduced or made zero for a period of time. So while these are some of the short-term fixes, on a longer-term basis, we need to really evaluate and ensure that ATF comes under GST, that we fix the way airports are charging. We try and develop some of our own technology in some spaces where we are paying extortionate amounts of money. We need to make sure that we become globally competitive, and this is the time to try and do that.
Thank you, Ajay. I must inform the audience that Ajay is also the chairman of the World Travel and Tourism in India Initiative, and therefore will play a very major role of interacting with the government, not only for aviation, but also tourism and hospitality. And we seek his good offices to carry back from this webinar messages and whatever is these reforms which are possible for tourism and travel industry. May I invite a lady right now? We've seen the airlines. Hopefully, railways will also come in. We've seen testing. May I invite Mrs. Jyoti Mayal be ready with his talk? Jyoti, thanks.
Yeah.
Please, speak.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv, and thank you, Radhaji, for initiating this and taking our views on this on such
our talks forward.
I think the travel agencies are going through a huge challenge, it's going through huge challenges. And what we see, the survival is going to be very, very tough. It's not going to be easy to survive. Yes, we need not only. Hello, there's something wrong. Hello. Hello. Yes. Can you hear me? I think. Yeah. Okay. Like we said, that we are really fighting the COVID-19, staying indoors, but our members are going through huge challenges, which I think is going to be a very huge issue. Because firstly, because I think we are a very unorganized sector. Travel and tourism is a very unorganized sector. So the organized players are very, you can say around 53,000 are organized sector, but there are 10 lakhs literally in unorganized sector. So the first thing that we are talking about is rebates and salaries, and the government pooling in to get salaries for us, which is going to be very challenging because it's an unorganized sector. So the revival of business is going to, we all aware, it's going to take more than 9 months. It's not going to happen this year. Somehow we feel that this year is just not going to be really we won't be seeing any business. So it's going to be very, very challenging. So that's the first thing which we've actually asked the government also, that the salaries are something which we really need to look into. The second, I think, which is very important, is that to start the business running once again, we really need GST waivers. We just cannot survive with such high GSTs, and something what TCS was also going to be applicable, which has been deferred right now till October. But all this GST and TCS doesn't come into place if there is no business. So even if when we are asking for GST deferment of GST, it can only happen when there is business, and there is no business. So we need to actually take inputs and reliefs and rebates in GST and TCS. And we've also asked the government for the revival of our industry is to incentivize domestic travel, because like Rajiv, you just said, and even Ajay has just said, that domestic tourism is the first thing that's going to open doors for us. And we would request the government, and we have requested them, to incentivize Indian corporates for holding MICE meetings and incentives in India. And we've also asked for 200% weightage deduction of these tax as expenses against GST invoice. So that's another thing which we have been looking at where GST is concerned. Another thing which I pointed out was yesterday was that we, and I'm coming to airlines now, basically, because that's where our members are really hit. when there will be no travel, there will be no tourism. It could be outbound or inbound. And yes, the in-between seat which needs to be vacant is a suggestion which has come from the entire industry, so that there is more social distancing, which we are going to get very used to living with it. And so we need to actually protect ourselves from the airlines too. I'm sorry I'm saying this here. Mr. Lohani is here and Mr. Ajay is here. And but somehow I think the onus has always of the industry been towards the travel agents. We have been giving joint bank guarantees, we've been giving uploads to the low cost carriers, we've been giving insurances to the airlines, so that we don't default. And IATA is very strict about us. Even 1 rupee we pay less, we are defaulted. But when the airlines go away, like Jet Airways went and other airlines go away, we are the ones who suffer the most. And somehow, I'm going to use this panel once again to reiterate that, somehow the Ministry of Aviation has never considered the travel industry as a part of them. They've always considered the airlines as a part of them. So that is something which I think with all of us sitting here, we need to take this forward, that our travel industry is a part of the Ministry of Aviation, and they should look at how they can protect our monies. And it's not always going to be the case that we are going to be the protectors and financiers of the airlines. So that is another thing which we are very, very wanting that to happen. And we've actually, this is the first time, if I can say so, that Ministry of Aviation has come forward since the time I have taken over as the president of TAI, and they have started interacting with us, and we've had 3 Zoom meetings with them too. So let's hope, and let's, with everyone's support, we could achieve that for our members. And lastly, I would just like to put that one more thing, that we want somehow that credit cards and digital payments should be, and this I'm talking about revival. Survival, of course, we've been talking about from the day one the lockdown has started, but this is on revival and thrival. I think we need digitization and digital money to come more in place. We want credit cards to be used more, and the charges of the credit cards to be looked by the government, that they are not exorbitant, so that our members can easily transact their businesses on credit cards, which is becoming a very huge challenge. Even though it's been approved by IATA, but still the airlines are not wanting to accept credit cards, and neither is a corporate wanting to pay by credit card. And somewhere down the line, I came to know that the small scale industry, there is a clause that they have to be paying within a month period, where our corporates take 60 to 90 days for credit. So it's becoming very difficult for the travel agents to survive, especially when the cash is going to be a big issue in the coming days. Lastly, I'm going to say one point which is very, very important for our industry, is that we do require an industry status to move forward in this country. Because being such an unorganized industry, we do not know where to turn to with the right data. The government struggles for data from us, and we struggle from our members and the entire fraternity to collect data, which we've been doing for the last 15 days and giving to the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Aviation, Ministry of Commerce. We've been collecting that because it's such an unorganized sector. So we would really see that, to survive is one point, but like Radhaji said, please speak on how we are going to move forward. And I think these are some things which really need to be put in place so the travel agents and the travel fraternity can survive. Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you, Jyoti. May I now request Mr. Ashwini Lohani. He's had experience from all ends, whether it is tourism development corporations. He could also then be the travel agent over there, whether it is running airlines, or whether it is running the largest ever department of government of India, which is the railways. And Ashwini is, a dear darling of the tourism and hospitality sector. So Ashwini, welcome to you, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Rajiv. It's a wonderful panel. And Ajay has already covered about airlines quite a lot. The airlines were always had a problem. We had airlines coming in, new airlines coming in and going out, always highly constrained. Inherent problems have been there. So this is the time to set right those problems also. And I was looking at SpiceJet's presentation yesterday, when you're marking X on the middle row seats, X on the buses. If you mark so many X's, the ticket prices are differently. They have to go up, and even otherwise the ticket prices have to go up, because one of the biggest problems that the airlines used to face was that the yield was actually constant for the last 20 odd years. In fact, yield went down in the last 20 odd years. How do you run a business in such a scenario? And when social distancing will have to maintain, your yields are further going to come down. We have to find some way of ensuring that the airlines are able to earn at least what they have to spend. You have to look at the ticket pricing model, the dynamics of it. How do we do it? Whether we fix a datum, don't fix a datum for the prices. That has to be looked at. But one thing is sure that there'll be a lot of apprehension for travel, because the incident which has happened, we are all experiencing it for the first time. Everybody experiencing it for the first time. Nobody has experience of it in the past. We really don't know how it's going to pan out, how it's going to impact, how long it's going to last. But what it appears is that there will be apprehension for travel. People will be apprehensive of traveling. People will be apprehensive of traveling long distances, I think especially international, and even far off within the country also. So in that backdrop, we have to see what can be done to promote tourism. And I think what appears is that it has to be focused on domestic tourism. It has to be focused on domestic tourism. We've been saying even otherwise, even before COVID, we have been saying the mainstay of Indian tourism is the domestic tourism. But now it's become more important, the Aspas brand of tourism. I've dabbled in tourism for the last 25 odd years, and we have been having the same discussions every year for the last 25 years. Same issues, but now with the impact of COVID, it's time to put all that at rest. Whatever recommendations have been made in the past, they have to be either taken forward one way or the other. But this is the time to sit down for the Ministry of Tourism and the various state departments of tourism is how to take domestic tourism forward once the scare of COVID goes away. Some sort of a very simple action plan has to be made. It has to be as simple as the action plan which we made when we were in the state of Madhya Pradesh. We made a very simple action plan and we implemented that, and tourism really took off. Some simple action plans have to be made, not those made by high-profile consultants. We were all expecting some sort of opening up will be there today, but it looks like we will have to wait for some more time. But travel has to begin before we talk about tourism. Right now, the railways have stopped. We could have never imagined. I think railways stopped for 1 or 2 days when Gandhiji died. That is the time railways stopped. And during the 1974 railway strike, it was a very short period in certain pockets that the trains stopped. For the first time, the trains have stopped across India. How do you talk of tourism in a scenario when the railways are not running, when the bus transport is not running, when there are no domestic flights, no international flights? But this will not carry on. This has to end. Has to end in the next 3 weeks, if not 3 weeks, a couple of weeks more, but this has to come to an end. And we have to strongly believe in that. They're all sitting at home, wasting our time. It can be more productive otherwise. The most important thing which everyone has to keep in mind is that he has to be fiercely positive. It's so easy to give up in such circumstances and when everything is stopped across the country. So easy to give up. When revenue streams have stopped, but the expenditure streams are still on, the fixed cost is still to be met. Well, that is all I had to say, and I think good times will definitely come back. Also for aviation, because in aviation, as Ajay knows, our penetration was very, very low compared to other countries. On a very low level. This has to go up ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwini. May I now request our Secretary General of the WTTCII and Mr. Sujit Banerjee, who's been the former Secretary of Tourism in Government of India and has been associated with tourism for the last 2 decades very closely indeed. Please do speak, sir.
Thank you, Rajiv. It has been a very trying time for all of us, we have to admit. Two statistics hit me the most amongst all the infodemic that we are having. One was that 1 million jobs are being lost per day. And you know, this might go up to 75 million worldwide by this time this COVID ends. And the second statistics was that 400 million people are being, you know, driven into poverty in India. So these two statistics do tell us that, you know, we are facing something which is absolutely the worst that could have happened. It's worse than 9/11. It's worse than 2008 financial crisis. I think it's worse than the Spanish flu of 1980. But at the same time, all of us are here representing so many associations, so many groups. This is a time for us to reflect a bit and say that, yes, we have our big lists, you know, to be all looked into by government, and, you know, this deferment and this reduction and this inclusion and this. But what also we need to say is that this is the time when we have to remember John F. Kennedy's quotation: ask not what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Can we, all of us, in our whichever capacity we are, can we say what we can do for our country? I think Ajay in SpiceJet and Ms. Mirchandani from Blue Dart have already begun all that, and they are doing all that, but we need to do much more. Rajiv, you mentioned that yesterday. My main focus was protocols, and that is one of the most important things that we need to sit. And this is how we can utilize our times that we are spending at home now to sit down with our expertise, our knowledge, our whatever we know, to make those protocols for the various sectors of our economy. And the guiding principle there will be what will start tourism again, and that guiding principle will be safe, healthy, and seamless. So these three things we have to keep in mind. SHS, not SMS, but SHS: safe, healthy, and seamless.
Thank you, sir.
And
thank you, sir. Can I request now Ms. Tulsi Mirchandani to give her views?
Thank you.
She's been at the forefront of providing services from Blue Dart even during this period of crisis, and that probably that industry is set to grow and rapidly grow as Ajay and Blue Dart are doing right now. Thank you, Ms. Mirchandani.
Good morning, everyone. As has been mentioned, you know, Blue Dart Aviation is part of
You've somehow muted yourself, Ms. Mirchandani. If you can hear me, you've put on the mute somewhere. That's got muted. Please set your mic. Okay, yes, you're now online. Please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Very clearly.
All right, thank you. Yes, so just to say that, you know, we've been part of the essential services, just like Mr. Lohani and Spice Express, Mr. Singh. And I would like to take a moment to laud, you know, my colleagues from both SpiceJet as well as Air India for the yeoman service they've been doing right through this lockdown period, as well as our people, pilots, our engineers, our ground staff, who've really been coming to work every single day to see that our flights operate. So we've been present on the various groups organized by the Ministry of Civil Aviation to support the government effort. But commercial demand has, however, declined, and that's inevitable. Because business and commerce has shut down. So we are operating at a reduced level. Now, unfortunately, in our kind of business, inventory is perishable and cannot be accumulated. So, we can't play catch up later in the year. So when we look at the various things that we need to do, cash conservation, of course, is imperative. But in an industry like ours, the highest component is of fixed cost. Whether you're looking at aircraft maintenance, the established costs, amongst others, and we can't wish this away. So we have to look at the variable cost, and a small proportion of that in comparison to the rest. So I think one of the things that we're doing is look at greater efficiency. How can we do more with less? And possibly once this period is over, we need to really review our dependence on automation. How can we introduce more automation so that at times like this, we are less dependent on manual intervention and operations can continue perhaps with a smaller workforce. But these are some of the things that we can do internally and they're quite limited. So, I would second what Mr. Singh has said, because if you look at an industry like ours, the express industry, we have about 1.7 million people today in the industry. And expected to grow up to about 2.7 million. That's a very, very large number. So the focus really should be on, I think we need to make a move away from profit maximization to sustainability. What do we need to do to make all the entities that are involved in our kind of business and in aviation more sustainable? I again second what Mr. Singh has said, that it's very important that we look at our price. It's dependent on cost, and there's a lot of cost sitting down there. A large proportion of it, which is the aviation turbine fuel, we still haven't brought that under GST, even though it has been under discussion for a long time. Reduction of the excise duty on ATF, and also the huge state taxes that we currently have to pay. Another solution could be possibly detriment of the lease rentals to the airport operators. And as I mentioned yesterday, some relief to the staff, because if you have such a large proportion of people working in our organizations, then how can we ensure sustainability of their jobs? Because I think the problem is, of course, both supply and demand. We've been hit, I think, for the first time with both. Now, while we can look at bringing back supply possibly comparatively faster, how does one boost demand? And therefore, there's a necessity for people to retain their jobs. And one of the suggestions, of course, which I made yesterday was, can the government support us in that area by possibly paying the employer's contribution directly, or supporting us in that area, at least for the staff who are lower down. So how do we cope with the new normal? I think as soon as all this is done, we need to put all our efforts into really getting our stuff and starting our work. And we need to support the sectors that are actually the largest employers, because we need to look at the country as a whole. Which are the segments that are supporting us and have the largest number of people? Construction, logistics, retail. So I feel that it's time that we need to bury our differences, whether they are ideological differences or business strategy, and put the best minds together to work. How do we boost demand, and how do we have our supply in place? Because a united action is going to benefit all of us. And I think this is what we need to focus on. We need to look at the big picture and get the country up and running. And as I said earlier, we need to move away from possible profit maximization to look at sustainability, all of us involved in various other sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tulsi ji. I think we have our last speaker right now, Dr. Sanat Kaul. Please, sir. And while we convey our sincere condolences to you on behalf of all of us, please go ahead with your words, sir.
Thank you, Rajiv. Yes, there is no doubt that not only are we facing a problem of pandemic, but also of extreme unemployment, poverty, and hunger. Now, we have to sort this out. I think the choice is between starting the economy against a lockdown. Well, starting with aviation, because aviation is perhaps the simplest way to start it, we have proposed from International Foundation for Aviation that aviation, commercial aviation domestically should be started. And it should be based on testing. Each passenger has to take a test given under the various regulations and the medical advice. Only then they can board an aircraft. And the testing has to be at their own cost, because I think passengers can still afford to increase the cost. So testing and flying to airports which are okay, which have been permitted, should be opened up so that at least the system starts and it moves forward. Number of good suggestions have been made, especially from Mr. Ajay Singh, which is regarding the system of privatization of airports, where the highest bidder has to he gets the airport, and then they have to pay to airport authority. Of course, airport authority gets the advantage of getting so much money, and they are able to develop smaller airports. But at the same time, it actually is raising the cost for airlines, and I think it needs to be looked into. As far as aviation in general is concerned, I think it is, in a way, although there have been a lot of pleadings regarding concessions, GST, and so on, but in a way, it is cost ineffective in the sense that passengers pay, and passengers are paying. Of course, it's a low-cost airlines have a very price sensitivity to the ticket, but passengers who are flying are able to pay a little extra amount. So I do agree that GST and other things should be also implemented now, but there are going to be repercussions from states and all. So whether it can be done or not is an issue of strategy. So I have a feeling that opening aviation sector, commercial aviation sector, should be done as soon as possible. It will help revive the economy, part of tourism, part of everything else. As far as international tourism is concerned, I think there is a need to have caution on that, because we don't know the background of people coming in and whatever we can insist on our testing, but even that testing is not good. The last thing which I thought I'll ask Dr. Dang, which we didn't get a time, is that there is also the fear of false positive. So that I think we have to look into. The second thing is that, you know, whether you keep one seat empty, which I think is not a viable option, is to have face covers and no eating at all, no drinking while the flight takes place. In India, the flights are not very long, 2.5 hours at the most. So that's, I think, how they should do it. And I feel that, you know, we have that this is the only way you can start the economy. The other thing is about drones, which are not part of this thing, but Mrs. Bhatia had mentioned to me that I could speak on that. That drones are a very important part of aviation sector, which are now finding so many applications world over. And India has been extremely tardy on use of drones, especially in the private sector. In fact, under the present regulation, there is a limitation, but a lot of police and other government organizations have started using them, and that's very good, and we should encourage that, because they reach areas where there's infection. We don't have to send any manpower there. So between these two things, I would like to thank you for asking me to speak. No, can't hear. No sound.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. May I request Radhaji to wrap up, and then Rohit, if you could do before that, you've been receiving the questions. So could you give the broad outline of the questions And if our panelists are still available, they are, of course, welcome to answer. But there'll be a large number of questions. So maybe the topic should be, and you should note down each one of the questions which has come. We can ask our panelists to reply to them and then send them an individual reply, or time permitting, even reply right here. So, Rohit, would you like to do it, or Radhaji, would you like to address and wrap up before? You're on mute, Radhaji. Now you're okay.
No, I am not mute.
Now you're okay.
Actually, I'm a mute person. I don't talk much.
Okay.
I make people talk.
Okay, thank you. You've done that already. And should we ask Rohit to come in with the questions so that they are placed and then you could wrap up the meeting?
I think that's better.
Yeah. Rohit, you can hear me.
Because I'll take another 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes, and my dear panelists who spared so much time have some other appointments also.
Rohit, can you go ahead with the broad category of questions, please? Thank you, Rohit.
Well, I'll be doing some good announcements after that.
Yeah, okay, yes. Go ahead, Rohit.
Since our panelists don't have much time, I will not go into each question in detail, sir. We have received a good about 40 questions, and I have assured all the participants who have asked the questions that we will try and get the panelists to get answer them offline and send them a mail accordingly. I have also requested them to mail the questions to us. I have given the email ID to them, sir. Now, basically, the questions that are focused on Mr. Ajay Singh are to do with how will SpiceJet tide this crisis, given the all-around financial crunch, and also there is a question about Spice Express, that since it is serving within India, can MOCA be approached to allow Spice Express to carry cargo to international sectors? This question comes from Mr. Asim Singla, who is the Secretary for Garment Exporters Association, and he feels that a lot of export cargo is available for sectors like Tokyo. I'll just request you to tackle these two questions, sir. Mr. Ajay Singh.
I think Mr. Ajay Singh has left, if I'm not mistaken. Rajiv, can you check?
Right, ma'am.
Yeah, he's not there.
Okay. So I'll just go over some of the other questions, and we can throw it open to the panelists. One is, we pay GST on input materials for movable and immovable items, but cannot take input tax credit on immovable items, example, passenger terminal building, runway, etc. But output GST is collected and paid on all receipts. So how do we compensate for this in this kind of a situation? While the panelists mull this question over, there is another question for Mr. Lohani. This is from Mr. Vipin Vora. When Air India started flights from Hong Kong and Shanghai, it was small importers in India who helped them fill up the first flights. Now, small exporter goods are being offloaded again and again since big players have bought all the freights. So how do you foresee the small exporters to be helped in this situation?
Hello.
This question is to Mr. Lohani, though I'm sure since he's no longer with Air India, but maybe with his experience he can.
Right now, it will be very difficult to comment on this question as such, because I've left Air India and I don't know what their plans are for taking cargo.
Right. There's a question about drones. I think Dr. Sanat Kaul can kindly tackle this. It says that, kindly enlighten us on the future of drones and regulations framed by the government of India. Drones can be used for various needs of society. How will the regulators differing from civil aviation requirement, CAR? What will be regulations for operation and maintenance of drones in and around airports, civil defense enclaves? How will hardware manufacturers and software developers get together to develop products as required by civil aviation for many drones? Dr. Kaul, sir, may I request you to please tackle this?
Yeah, I think drones is a special issue which needs a lot of thinking, because unfortunately we have delayed the introduction of drones in India, while other countries have gone forward. And even now the restrictions are very strong. I think firstly they should relax it for anything to do with COVID-19. Now, even the import of drone is restricted because there has to be, you know, a regulation within which a chip has to be put, and there are only 2 or 3 manufacturers in India who have been permitted. So there are a lot of issues regarding drones. So drones are a subject which is which has been very tardy in India. And the other side is that there's a lot of fear that misuse of drone can be very damaging. Yes, of course it can be, but misuse of drone, the person who's going to do it is not going to take permission to misuse it. So that should be taken as a separate issue. It has nothing to do with the drones which are being used for good applications, whether it is for COVID-19 or it is for agriculture or it is for high tension lines. That is a separate issue, and I think that's got mixed up with this. So the security issues of drones are very important, and they are, an anti-drone policy has to be there, which is not there at all. So anti-drone policy is required. That is my view. And the other is that, you know, there has to be immediate relaxation for import of drones for COVID-19 purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaul, sir. I'm afraid we have quite a few more questions, but we have run out of time since the panelists also have other engagements.
Take the questions. Rohit, we'll be very grateful if you can note down these questions and we get back with an individual reply to each one of the questioners. And we are grateful to them for having joined the seminar. May I request Radhaji to wrap up? And Ashwini, would you like to say something? Because I thought you were leaning forward. Would you like to say something before, or can we ask Radhaji to wrap up?
Yeah, I think we can ask Radhaji to wrap up.
Okay, Radhaji, please, I'm grateful to you that you could organize this. We're all very grateful to you, and we look forward to more of such gatherings so that this can go forward rather than the panelists waiting. We've all made our points. In future, it can be straightway a question answer session with the participants. Thank you, Radhaji.
First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists who joined on a short notice, and I think it has been a very crispy and a very fruitful talk. Next time, I will have the same panelist, but maybe a different topic to take it forward. I would also like at this time to thank all the attendees. Actually, we had started with only 100, but as the request came in, I think we are close to about 400 today. And next time, I think we'll be close to about 500 people because everybody is very interested. At this time, I would like to thank Mr. Modi for extending this. I know there's always a talk. What is important, life or livelihood? If there is no life, there will be no livelihood. So I know we all have to bear with it for another 15 days, but that is important. That sacrifice has to be done for livelihood. My special thanks to Dr. Naveen Dang. With a short notice, he has been able to join us for this meeting. Unfortunately, he had to join some other meeting, so he had to go. Unfortunately, Ajay and Tulsi also had to leave because they had another meeting at 12. We wanted it very short and crispy, but the topic is so much into the hearts of everybody that it has been a little longer. I think we are about 7 minutes over time. As I had promised to everybody, they have all left. I think some of our panelists are still there. If you want to have question and answers with them, most welcome to carry on. I think I'm told that we have more than about 55, 60 questions from various journalists and also from the trade partners. I would especially like to thank everybody, especially the media, who has been so interested and have come to this. I know there are so many web seminars happening, but I think this has been a real success, and I would like to thank them. As Mr. Banerjee said, that aviation, hospitality are the largest employers. 100 million people losing their jobs. Incredible. I don't think the government can feed 100 million people at the same time. And worldwide, it is 7.10 million. Incredible figures. What can we do to revive this at a very early stage is the next question. I think we'll have a quick roundup with all the panelists and a few more people to see how it can be done at a quick start. I did contact Niti Aayog and some of the other government departments, but they were all busy and they have promised to join in at a later stage. So I would ask, if Rajiv Talwar is here, I would ask him and all the panelists to get together, make some questions so that next time when we have a web seminar, these questions can be very well put to everybody. That will create a massive impact on everybody. I think today we have some delegates from Ministry of Tourism, DTDC, NSDC, Skill Development, and probably also some of my old friends from Ministry of Civil Aviation. I would especially like to thank them for sparing their time. Before I wrap up, the most important thing is skill development, because many people have gone to the villages. Probably they may not come back. The blue collars have to be protected and more jobs to be created. So I would like the panelists and also the attendees to give their suggestions. You could also give it on the same link and we will get back to you. If some of the panelists are still there, I would request everybody from the question answer session, I would request Rohit to take it forward if possible. With this, once again, I thank everybody from the core of my heart. When we started this conference, Rajiv Talwarji said, well, will you be speaking or not? I said, I'm not a speaker, but I always like to take some pangas. You know what pangas are? Some challenges. And I think this was a challenge which we did in a week's time. And thanks to everybody, it has been a big success. With my folded hands and namaste, I thank each one of you and giving this mic to Rohit.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we have only Mr. Banerjee and Dr. Kaul who are left with us. So what I will request is that in case anyone in the audience have any questions from these two esteemed panelists of ours or from Mrs. Bhatia, please raise your hands. There is a facility to raise your hand. I can see 3 hands raised. So what I will do is I will allow, I will unmute the people who raise their hands. So firstly, I see Shelly Vishwajit. Shelly, please ask your question. Shelly,
Probably gone.
Can you hear me, sir?
yes, please. Can you please ask your question?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much to all great panelists. This was a great learning, great opportunity. I'm Shelly Vishwajit, a senior journalist and author of the Indian story, the Indigo story. Anyway, sir, my question was specifically to 2 panelists who have left now. But Dr. Kaul is here and Radha ma'am is there. Maybe, sir, do you see in the coming scenario some kind of break on predatory pricing as far as aviation sector is concerned? And my second question to all the panelists was, we are only talking about revival of economy and how to bring it back on the feet. But during the lockdown, everybody was talking about how the planet is healing. Nobody is talking about reduced growth, sustainability, why business globally, we as a human being need to slow down and not go into the same kind of exploitation of natural resources based growth model. Nobody is talking about that kind of long-term vision. Sir, any of the panelists, please. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, I can talk on the predatory pricing. As
Yes,
far
sir.
as in India, the DGCA has within the Aircraft Act provision to look into predatory and excessive pricing. And that is something which they have not done because they've allowed free pricing after the liberalization. So there is a provision which exists in the rule book. And if it is implemented, then they have to define what predatory pricing is, what is excessive pricing, and sector-wise also have to see, and then ensure it doesn't happen. That's all I can say just now. Predatory pricing or excessive pricing is not an issue with the government. Thank you.
Karthikeya from Aviation Talk.
Regarding the second question, which Mr. Shelley, though we didn't specifically talk about environment or how you see all around you, you see birds coming back, you see, the sky is absolutely clear. So somebody did a little bit of how it will impact our lifestyles. So some of the things that he or she said was, number 1, which came out, do not waste food. Okay.
I think.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Chatterjee, I think your video has got stopped.
Okay.
We can hear you. We can still hear you.
Okay. And be more mindful of health. Become more hygienic. Spend more time with family. Spend less on clothes and accessories, etc., etc., and etc. Our lifestyles will all change. The normal that we have been following so far will change. We will have to become more conscious about these things. Thank you.
Next question, Mr. Pradeep Maharish. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, fine. I thank you, everybody, and thanks for the panelists. Thanks to the panelists for basically, for all their thoughts. In all this, I probably, unless I missed it out, I found that a very important segment of the industry, which literally supports just about every possible industry today in the world, and that is the IT and ITES sector, primarily was missing. My concern out here is that A, as far as India is concerned, it's a major contributor to the GDP of the country. B, it employs a substantial amount of manpower. C, it is basically helping in just about every initiative which enterprises are taking in terms of automation or in terms of cost reduction. But at this moment of closure, which is of course very much needed, I think what is important is to address two questions out here. One is that it has not been considered by the government as an essential service, even though it provides, global services like banking, insurance, health, and even in aviation and other activities, and needs to be there. The manpower needs to be there to basically, attend to the needs of the end customer. Work from home, of course, is a feasibility, but of course it's limited by law. And it's also restricted because of the high cost which is involved. And the second part, of course, which I wanted to say out here was that going forward, in terms of its survival and for the survival of the people who work in this industry, how is NASSCOM and other bodies taking this up with the government of India?
Would any of the panelists like to take this on, please?
Not me.
Well, this question can be answered by the IT industry as to how they would like to go forward. And next time we'll have somebody from the IT industry also.
Yeah, but because it is very, very important that this industry is looked into. It's needed just by about every major core enterprise as such, whether it's aviation, whether it's banking, whether it's insurance, whether it's health. It's just about needed by everybody. And, I was just hearing an interview between Pranav Roy and Dr. Raghuram Rajan the other day. And a very valid question out here is that this complete lockdown, because of which global customers are unable to get themselves service because their services are all centered out of India, majorly the Gurgaon, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, and Mumbai hubs. They're not able to reach them, and the big fear is that this might basically lead post-COVID into countries considering, how safe it is primarily to have offshoring of such activities to India and other countries. So I think we cannot ignore this. We have to look into this, and we have to find out a way to address this.
Thank you, Pradeep.
Well noted.
We will, like ma'am said, we'll try and have a session with the relevant people in the IT industry, and it may be more relevant to put this across to them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Desh Sahai, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Desh Sahai, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, Nalin Kapadia. Nalin Kapadia, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I'm from a mid-level travel agency. I have also worked on certain committees like TAFI and other organizations. I was just wondering that most of the talks are going on about the big scale and the big players in this industry. Travel agents are never been considered as an important aspect of the role or the connector of this operations of this industry. I understand even today, as of now, more than 70% of the ticket sale on airlines are through travel agents. The airlines never talk about travel agents. They never address any of their problems. The government or the civil aviation never thinks about the travel agents. We are made to pay, we are got a GST on our service fee. So actually what the government is telling that please reveal your margins to your customers and ask them to pay that margin to you. Which industry, which business runs on revealing their own margins to their customers? Do you buy anything by telling, you ask when you buy a card, you ask him what is your margin? And I will pay service tax on that margin. Will the car industry will survive? But why is travel agents so considered? Nowhere in this industry, and it is nowhere part the travel agents are made to suffer, as I think Jyoti ji already expressed over here, but none of the panelists unfortunately talked about travel agents and the people who link the travel business. Travel will survive, travel will revive through travel agents and not through just talking about all other aspects of travel.
Thank you, Nalin. What is your question, please?
My question is, what is the industry going to do about the travel agents? If you are interested in reviving travel business, what are they going to do about travel agents who are the link between all the services?
Nalin, this time, Jyoti Mayalji already addressed this problem, and she has also gone to the Ministry of Civil Aviation and has taken it up with them. So I would say this time is the first time a woman is heading TAI, and she will be competent to take care of your problems. We will put your question over to her also so that she doesn't forget about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to all the attendees. And like we said, quite a few questions which were to Mr. Lohani and to Mr. Singh and Dr. Dang. We will reach out to them and try and obtain the answers from them and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.